Hello and welcome to the Over and Back Classic NBA podcast. I am Jason, and with me as usual is Rich. Hello, Rich.
Hey, what's up, Jason?
Oh, hanging in there. Unfortunately, 2020 continues to give us some tremendously sad news, and the latest sad news in the NBA world specifically is the death of Clifford Robinson, August 29th on 2020, only 53 years old. So we're going to talk about his career here. Definitely a really good player for a really long time. Just had incredible longevity in his career, part of a lot of winning teams. And, of course, some of those early 90s Portland Trailblazers teams that you and I like to dig into here and there, who I think probably get a little bit overlooked in NBA history.
Yeah, no, just a terrible story to hear tomorrow. Not completely out of nowhere for people that kind of followed his life after the NBA. I mean, he had been obviously doing a bunch of different things and had been, we're going to talk about it in a bit, a big proponent for the legalization of marijuana and stuff like that, and had done, opened up dispensaries and things like that. But yeah, he had some health issues over the last few years, so not totally out of nowhere, but still definitely something that was kind of like, oh crap, Cliff Robinson's dead. Man, that's
right.
That
yeah,
sucks.
Exactly.
Just one of those things. Mostly because he had health issues, but he still, as you said, was in his early 50s. So it's just kind of surprised when, and it's and we've talked about this before too. It's remarkable how few NBA players have died. You know what I mean? Like it when you compare it to other sports and other things, like there's 2 MVPs in the history of the league that are dead right now. And that's insane. Kobe Bryant is the another tragic one. That's only legit one has died of older age, and even then, Wilt Chamberlain was not that old. He just had so it's unbelievable the longevity that some of these guys just live and live and live, and it's awesome to see that there are so few deaths in NBA history so far.
Yeah, especially again among the prominent players, the legends,
right.
Guys like that. I mean, obviously we've lost guys more recently like Moses Malone, but yeah, in terms of the absolute upper echelon of guys, there aren't off of that many. We've been lucky that that early generation of guys, like George Mikan, guys have passed away in fairly recent last 10, 15 years. I mean, those guys all lived to, most of them lived to, 80 or so years old, had good long lives. So we've been blessed there, but unfortunately, we've lost some guys too. Clifford Robinson and this early 90s Blazers teams, they've been disproportionately hit. I mean, when we first started doing the show, that was around the time Jerome Kersey passed away. Kevin Duckworth has passed away. Of course, Drazen Petrovic, of a extremely young age. Yeah. So, but yeah, again, in terms of the absolute legends of the game, we've been fortunate that a lot of those guys have managed to stay around and have long lives. But I mean, going back to Clifford Robinson, I didn't really know much about his college career, but he was actually, Jim Calhoun for University of Connecticut, UConn, called him kind of the first big star of that program in the late 80s as it kind of rose from, complete obscurity into being, one of the top, Big East programs. He led them to the NIT in 1988. He was later, named to UConn's All-Century men's team, and his number was retired in 2007, the 00. So, he was a really, I kind of had no idea about that part of his career, but that was definitely pretty interesting.
Yeah, no, he's and UConn. We know them now. I mean, people that follow college basketball know them as one of the more, I wouldn't say one of the top most elite teams, but one that throughout the 90s and the early 2000s was just churning out NBA players left and right. Won, I think, 2 or 3 NCAA tournament or NCAA titles. Were in the Sweet 16, the Elite 8, almost every single year. I've fallen on some little harder times. I guess they did win another title, back in 2011 or whatever. But yeah, you look at it and you look at, the stars that came out of UConn, the stars that came under, Jim Calhoun, Reggie Lewis, obviously a few years prior, we another tragic death, unfortunately, with Reggie Lewis. And then, Cliff Robinson comes as kind of the second or third sort of NBA player underneath Jim Calhoun. And then, the list just explodes after that. So yeah, he really does kind of start the trend of guys coming out from UConn and going on to having, great NBA careers, guys like Caron Butler, Emeka Okafor, Ben Gordon, Charlie Villanueva, Rudy Gay, Kemba Walker, Andre Drummond, like those sort of guys, many, many more. Daniel Marshall, Ray Allen, of course. Yeah, I can't forget Ray Allen in that as well. Richard Hamilton as well. So, I mean, just a laundry list of like really, really, solid NBA players coming out of that program. And yeah, Cliff Robinson being one of the first, ones to kind of graduate from there and go on to do that. So.
Yeah, and he absolutely you kind of got that started, as we said. When he went into the NBA draft, he was not highly touted. He was the 36th overall pick of the draft in 1989. He was actually the latest pick of that draft to make an All-Star game, in the second round. But he is second only to Vlade Divac in terms of all-time win shares from that draft. Other notable guys who were in there: Sean Kemp, Tim Hardaway, of course, Purvis Ellison, drafted number 1. Yeah.
Well, can't win them all. Yeah. I mean, luckily Sacramento has righted the ship after that and realized, the errors of ways. Exactly. A model NBA franchise from that point forward. So.
Absolutely. Glenn Rice, Dana Barros, BJ Armstrong, Sean Elliott, Nick Anderson. So not a biggest star ever type draft, but some good names there. And again, that longevity set him apart certainly from the rest of the guys. But yeah, you had a kind of interesting quote from Rick Adelman about that.
Yeah, there was a great article from the it was sorry, what was the source? It was, I think it was, what the hell was it? It was OregonLive.com. Yeah, sorry, OregonLive.com. That had a really good article about Blazers' top 40 players in history. That had a lot of really cool quotes, and this one was Rick Adelman saying, quote, "He was the guy on draft night sitting in that New York draft room, and no one would take him. Everybody passed on him. He was the only one left into the board on our draft room. He was highly touted, but some scouts said he had a surly reputation and this and that. Well, the first time I talked to him, he was down. And then we talked about it, and we decided it was time to prove everybody wrong about him. And absolutely did. I mean, 36 overall pick. You don't usually find, like, solid, guys that are going to be with your team for a decade plus in the 36th pick of an NBA draft in the second round. And they did. They found a guy who maybe not immediately was a contributor, but by, 2-3 years into his career was as important as almost anybody on that team and would go on, to have almost a decade with Portland being, one of their top players, whether it be off the bench or whether it be as a starter. No doubt the production, we'll talk about that here in a bit, but just a great value to get at 36, and just sucks that and they have kind of slimmed it down a little bit, where they used to you watch old drafts and like everybody's in the draft room, they invite everybody, and it's just like the worst thing ever when there's like one guy sitting there left, like, oh man, like nobody wants me. Luckily they've stopped that and only really like invite people that they are very sure are going to go pretty early, but not in those days. Those days everybody got invited. So
yeah, and I think probably best known, of course, first trademark headband, which we'll talk a little bit more about. The fact that he was such a versatile defensive player, he was able to guard big and small players effectively, and for stretching the floor as a big man. And in fact, he actually had two second team appearances on the all defensive team, which surprised me a bit. I kind of thought of him more as just kind of a offensive player. Same. Didn't really do much on defense, but he definitely and we'll get into it a little bit, like early on in his career, he didn't get a lot of minutes his first 2-3 seasons with the Blazers, but he did a lot defensively, for those teams, and was guarding like Isaiah Thomas like as a rookie in the 1990 finals, and was guarding. You could guard big and small guys, as we said. So, really was able to. He wasn't putting up a lot of numbers or anything. Was able to kind of contribute in other ways until later. He kind of became the leading or one of the top scorers for the team for kind of the second half of his 20s and into his early 30s.
Yeah, and I was watching some highlights of him and some game tape and stuff like that. And one thing that totally caught me, immediately was, as you said, like he can guard a point guard, he can guard Isaiah Thomas. They put a big, lengthy, guy on Isaiah Thomas that has the same speed, the same athleticism, and all that sort of stuff. And another thing that really caught me as well looking at his defense, is he was incredible at like leaving his man to go block another guy. Like if you look at his early, Portland days, I mean, he is so super athletic and so long, and he's just able to swat things out of the air. And like, this is an NBA era where like in those days you really weren't supposed to just like jump as high as possible to try to block somebody. Like it in many ways was seen as like, don't do that. Like, you got to stay by your man, or, stay on the ground, or do that sort of stuff. But what he was able to do is leave his guy real quickly. So, he sees a shot going up by an opposing center. He would be able to leave his guy real quick, jump over there and just swat him out of nowhere. And yeah, you see how, the defensive reputation right off the bat is like, oh man, this is a guy who can block the ball. He can defend bigs, and he can defend point guards as well. He can defend shooting guards. He can defend every all 5 positions. And in those days, I mean, that's just not something that happened very often. I mean, Scottie Pippen was one that was notable about doing it, and Clifford Robinson obviously is another one that joins right along with there. But yeah, now it's like commonplace that you switch 1 through 5, everybody can kind of guard everybody. But not in those days. You know what I mean? Nobody, people were not like this. They weren't this athletic at this size, and one thing, and we'll talk about it a lot as well, but I had always thought of him as more of a, kind of a scorer as well. And you look at his body frame and the way he scored, and where shots came on the floor. And we say this about a lot of guys, but he's one that definitely, like, you can close your eyes and transplant him into 2020 basketball, and there's like no, like he doesn't miss a beat, I don't think.
Right.
It's not like, this guy, and even in those days, like, it's amazing that they didn't tell him, you need to gain 50 pounds and get down low or whatever. They were like, you know what? You are what you are. Shoot some mid-range jumpers, shoot some threes, be athletic, jump all over the floor. But like, yeah, he is, there's some guys where you need to change some things. Okay. Yeah. If he did this, he could fit in. It's like, I don't think you have to change anything about Cliff Robinson. Like, you can transplant 1991 Cliff Robinson into 2020 NBA, and I think he's still pretty solid.
Yeah, just ask him to shoot a few more threes.
Yeah, exactly. Back up a few more feet, and we're good.
There you go. Right. Yeah. Well, and then we'll get into it, but he shot a lot of threes, especially in the late '90s. Obviously, that was when the 3-point line got moved in. But yeah, and he shot 35% for his career from 3 points. So yeah, other than taking a few more, he probably would fit in that way just as well. You're absolutely right. So. Yeah, kind of the overview of his career, mostly known for his 8 years beginning his career with the Trailblazers from 1997. As you said, key piece off the bench of 2 finals runs, and then was, more of a leader of the team in the mid-90s. But they were still, good, not great by that point, as, they transitioned kind of from the Clyde Drexler era into the next era. Then he signed with the Suns as a free agent, spent 4 years there, including the time which they had Jason Kidd, Kevin Johnson, and Steve Nash. And we talked about that team a bit in our 20 years ago series in the 1998 season. But, had some good time there. We're going to talk about a couple of his most notable games actually happened when he was a Sun. Then he went to the Pistons for 02-03 seasons, including a run to the Eastern Conference Finals. That was kind of right before, they solidified that team, getting Rasheed Wallace, and, had their really more famous run, but they were still, very good, coached by Rick Carlisle for those 2 years when he was there. And then kind of ended his career with a year and a half with the Warriors and 2.5 years with the Nets, retiring after the 2007 season. Those Nets were, Jason Kidd again, also got Vince Carter during that time. So again, pretty okay, solid team. I think made the second round once or twice there. But obviously he was, almost 40 at that point, and only had a very small role by that last season. But again, that's 17, 18 years in the league. Some really impressive stuff.
Yeah, I always remember, in those days, the times when he would play, which, few and far between or whatever, but like, when he would play, it was just like, man, Cliff Robinson's still in the league. Like, that's nuts, man. Like, I have like vivid memories of him in like the early 90s being like a very productive player. And, he did sort of, obviously he fell off a little bit, but when you look at his numbers, like, it's not like he was just completely an absolute nothing by the time he retired. Like, yeah, no, he wasn't scoring in double figures anymore, but he was still playing, 20 minutes a game, still playing off the bench, still could contribute in some ways and do some stuff. It's just, by that final New Jersey year when he's 40 years old, yeah, the shooting is kind of abandoning him. The athleticism is kind of abandoning him. But I mean, yeah, when you talk about a guy like remarkable consistency, I'd say, yeah, for 10 to 13 to 14 years in that range, like, solid as hell, and you kind of knew what you were going to get out of him every single year. And it wasn't until those final 2 years where it kind of really fell off. And even though the fall off is like, yeah, it's fine, like, he's still like an okay player. It's just, obviously the NBA had passed him by a little bit, but hey, when you're 40 and you've been playing since 1990, that's going to happen. So that's definitely cool. Him and Kevin Willis, I think, were still around in 2004 or 2007 rather, I should say, which is awesome. So yeah, two just like lengthy, awesome careers of those two guys.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and yeah. Even look at like '04 in Golden State when he's 37
still good.
years old. He's 12 points a game. He's shooting 36% from three. The overall field goal percentage is not strong. That definitely fell off. In his mid 30s, but he's still definitely contributing. He played 82 games that year, so and they weren't we'll get into it later. That was the first team he ever missed the playoffs with. But I mean, they were a 35 win team. It wasn't like they were like, completely at the bottom of the lottery. Like, they were a competitive team.
Yeah.
Like, he had a big role for a competitive team at age 37. There's not a lot of guys who can really say that in NBA history. It's a fairly small hand.
Yeah, he started. I mean, and that's too, like, we're going to talk about him coming off the bench a lot and stuff. He started all 82 games for that team, and they were like fine. You know what I mean? They weren't good. They weren't great, but they were fine, and they were starting a 37-year-old every single game of the year. I mean, that's pretty remarkable.
Exactly. Yeah. And then after the NBA, he had a brief run on the TV series Survivor, and then became an activist for legalized cannabis when marijuana became legal in Oregon. He got involved in a dispensary and had a business there. And as you mentioned, before, kind of recently it had some health problems. He suffered a brain hemorrhage in 2017, and I hadn't heard much recently on that. I didn't know. Again, didn't know he had serious health problems. It was probably something that was kept relatively quiet. But he'd been definitely still involved in. He was fairly active on Twitter. He was still involved with. His NBA activities, kind of late, in the early 2000s and stuff. So he wasn't he wasn't around all the time, but he was certainly, was still making news, even, later on in, after his career.
Yeah, it definitely wasn't the, hey, what happened to that guy thing. It was like people kind of knew what he was up to, in one way, shape, or form. Yeah, they're very active on Twitter. We will talk about because he owned us back in 2017. So I'm excited to talk about it. One of our proudest moments is getting owned by Cliff Robinson. So
sure, absolutely. Yeah, and you looked up some of the, again, we talked about how he had a long career, some of the ranks he had in NBA history.
Yeah, no, some great longevity stuff from Cliff Robinson here. So at 6'10", we mentioned that before, tall player, kind of one of the original stretch fours, a lot of weight. He is the one of the tallest players to make more or 1,000 career 3-pointers. He was actually the first one of that height to make 1,000 career 3-pointers. He was surpassed by Dirk and Rashard Lewis, and in the subsequent, now in the next 5 to 10 years, he'll be passed by many men. But it still is, he still ranks third all time in that, and only the guys, Dirk Nowitzki, who obviously one of the best big men shooters of all time, and then Rashard Lewis, who almost you kind of forget is 6'10" because he was almost always a shooter. It's pretty awesome to be in that class. But of course, as we said, this unfortunately will be something that he gets passed up by a lot as the game has sort of changed and altered and stuff like that. But still, remarkable number there. 14th in NBA history for games played. I don't think I would have off the top of my head if you told me, hey, who's top 15? Is Cliff Robinson top 15 in games played in NBA history? I don't think I would say yes, but he was, and that's awesome. That's really cool. 25th, I should say, in minutes played as well. And then he's the only player in NBA history to reach career totals of 1,250 3-pointers made, 1,250 steals, and 1,250 blocks as well. So good overall numbers. Just speaks to his versatility, his longevity, and just what he was able to do across the board as well. And then this is what caused the owning, and we'll talk about the owning in a little bit here. But he is top 10 in most wins in NBA history by a player. He trails only Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, Robert Parrish, Tim Duncan, John Stockton, Karl Malone, Dirk Nowitzki, and Derek Fisher. That's pretty good company to keep, I'd say. That's not bad. And Tony Parker and Kobe Bryant as well. Sorry, but still.
Yes.
Those are all, and then there's Cliff Robinson, which is, what led to the owning. Because we're like, wow, those are all-time great players. And then there's also Cliff Robinson there. But that speaks, again, to his longevity, and it speaks to the success. We're going to talk about that as well. There is, one season where he misses the playoffs, and it was a big deal because it's oh my God, Cliff Robinson missed the playoffs. What the hell? So that's cool. When you do that, you're going to rack up a lot of wins.
Yeah, absolutely. I wanted to give credit to Justin Kubaka, who found that stat on the fact that he was the only player who had the 1250 3 points made, steals, and blocks in his career. That was a good find. So, yeah, just now we're going to kind of go through. We picked 10 key moments of his career that I think kind of helped tell the story of of his career. First, we'll start with his debut on November 3rd, 1989, his NBA debut, and perhaps just as important, the NBA debut of his headband. So the game was, it was his debut was also the debut of Drazen Petrovic, who I think people forget that sometimes that, Drazen was actually on the Blazers for the first couple seasons of his career. Didn't really do a whole lot there. Up until he was traded to the Nets, but was certainly on that team. Robinson had 10 points and 5 rebounds in 18 minutes in his debut was against Sacramento Kings. It was a 114-96 Blazers win. And of course, he rocked the headband, for the first time. He was not allowed to wear it in college. Jim Calhoun would not allow him to do that. And there's a New York Times article from 2007 kind of, talking about how he was the, pioneer and kind of that was around the time where the headband was really coming back. But he said that he was the only player wearing a headband during his rookie season in '89. In his quote, when you think back on it, it's pretty cool to be the person who brought it back to where it's not looked at as ridiculous. Because it was definitely kind of a thing in the 70s. Mm-hmm. I mean, Wilt, I think, is credited with being kind of the first player to have it sort of toward the end of his career.
Slick Watts,
obviously, it kind of made it cool back then. But yeah, when he was wearing it, it was kind of more. I don't know. I guess maybe because like the fitness trend of the 80s and people kind of wearing headbands, it kind of went from like a fad cool thing to like sort of a dorky thing. At least for a while. But yeah, he was kind of the guy who started to make it cool again. It took a while, but till like the early 2000s for it to really kind of spread along the league. But that's just kind of that's kind of a cool thing.
Yeah, no, I'm trying to, I think the lineage I think most people would kind of follow is, like you said, Wilt to Slick Watts to, I guess, kind of Bill Walton, but Bill Walton's wasn't, straight up headband. And you're absolutely right. Like the 80s, it kind of came like the dorky, fitness thing is to wear a headband. And yeah, Cliff was just like, screw that. I'm going to wear a headband. It's awesome. And yeah, he brings it back and it takes a little bit of a while. And then once Allen Iverson embraces it, it's pretty much on and ready to go. Cause then you get, Vince Carter, Paul Pierce, Ben Wallace, eventually LeBron James, Carmelo, then it's just like, it's off to the races. But yeah, he definitely, after, I don't know, about 20 years or so of it, like basically I don't know off the top of my head I can remember one player in the 80s wearing it. I'm really honestly racking my brain to try to think of any. So yeah, I mean, he an entire decade where it almost goes away completely, and yeah, he brings it back, and it's like one of easily his most important characteristics. Like the thing that everybody I think remembers about Cliff Robinson more than anything was that headband. He just nailed it. He rocked it perfectly. Once he got the bald head, it was even better. It just like looked so slick, and I just remember as well, like, playing like the early NBA video games, like the Bulls versus Blazers or NBA Live 95 or whatever. And they would always put his headband in there. It would be this like bright white headband. And he stood out from every other player on the court. And he did that in real life as well. I mean, the headband became synonymous with him. And it's super cool that he was able to do that. And one thing you mentioned there is in Connecticut, he was not allowed to wear it. I was watching highlights and I wonder as well, I don't think he was wearing it in Phoenix. And did you ever find out if there was a reason why he didn't wear it in Phoenix, or did they have like a low key, like, they wouldn't allow it or something?
I think that must have been it, because I was looking at pictures, and every picture I found with him with the Suns, he didn't seem to have it.
Yeah, so okay.
They must, that seems like the most logical reason they didn't allow them for some reason. So,
well, who's the? I'm trying to figure out who's the coach.
Was Danny Ainge for the most part?
I can probably blame Danny Ainge.
Yeah, or Jerry Colangelo.
It's probably a Colangelo thing too. Well, what I was thinking is because Scott Skiles, I remember, was pretty anti, but he was only there I think the last year of Cliff. Scott Skiles adapted it from Danny Ainge / Jerry Colangelo, because I know when Skiles went to the Bulls later, he did that with Ben Wallace. They signed Ben Wallace. He's like, yeah, you can't wear a headband. Right. They're like, why'd you sign Ben Wallace then?
Yes.
He's like, no, like that's like my thing. Yes. Are you kidding? Like, why would you sign me then? If like, get that headband off, kid.
What the heck?
Like
Yes,
that's pretty much my
headband.
identity, but I mean
Right.
that's fine.
All
So
right.
yeah, they
Cool.
must. Okay, so the Suns. You noticed that as well because I was watching these highlights and I'm like, is he just wearing like a very dark purple headband and I just can't see it or notice it?
Right.
And then on those videos I couldn't tell and I was like, what the hell? And then I looked at photos and I'm like, yeah, that's gone. And then the reason I knew it had to be something with Phoenix is because the second he's in New Jersey and Golden State, the headband's back on. He's rocking it again. So screw you, Phoenix, for killing a little bit. He was very good at Phoenix though, so maybe the headband was a detriment to his career.
Who knows?
But not really, no, 'cause it was
No.
awesome. So.
Yeah, he said, in the same article, Clifford told a story about like, oh yeah, you try to get the trainer to get him headbands, and at first, like he thought he said he thought maybe the trainer thought he was kidding because it took a while to get them. Finally, he got some that like had like Velcro tabs on the ends that were he's like fastened around his head, and wore those for a couple games before he actually got the traditional ones and had them throughout his career. But as we talked about, yeah, he didn't play like a lot of he didn't have a huge role as a rookie, but he definitely was in the rotation. In the playoffs as a rookie, he played 21 games there. He started 6, had 6.5 points per game, 4.1 rebounds per game, 1 steal, 1 block, and only 19 minutes per game. So was definitely putting up numbers and was contributing. Also, he filled in at center for a injured Kevin Duckworth in the second round series against the Spurs that went 7 games. I think Duckworth came back in game 7 that the Blazers won to advance. But Rick Adelman talked about like, from the first practice after the draft and beyond, I could never believe how versatile he was. He could play power forward, small forward, center, and his versatility and how he could defend is really what made our teams back then. So was able to, again, carve out a role as a rookie and as a real young player early on for, teams that were really stacked.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, coming into and it's always tough for a rookie to join a team that is good. You know what I mean, and try to find a spot
Right.
and find a role. And yeah, he comes into the team and they're like, "Hi, we're going to the NBA Finals this year." It's like, oh, okay, like, and it's not even like and it's. We always talk about this Portland team as well. Like the depth on this team was just incredible. Like 10 deep, they're really, really good. So to carve out a spot on that team is going to be difficult. So yeah, Cliff, what we would know him as being and really what his skills would be weren't really that evident as a rookie. But he was able to fill out, like you said, different roles as a rookie and just say, okay, I'll do whatever I need to do. I'll be good. I'll be a versatile defender. I'll do this. I'll do that, or whatever he could do to get on the court and prove that he belonged. And he absolutely did that. And yeah, like we said, by another year or two later, he's what we know Cliff Robinson as, and he's a huge part of that entire team.
Yeah. Again, he's stuck behind guys, Jerome Kersey's in the team, Clyde Drexler, Buck Williams, Kevin Duckworth, Terry Porter, guys, whatever role he would kind of fit in, any forward spot or any the center spot is all filled out with guys who are really, good and really good contributors. So just kind of finding the role within that there and then, excelling, is kind of a testament to his talent and his, persistence. So, so next key thing is obtaining his Uncle Cliffy nickname. You want to take that one?
Yeah, let's talk about Uncle Cliffy here because this has become his legacy in a lot of ways as much as the headband. Uncle Cliffy. So following Game 4 of 1992 Western Conference Finals against the Jazz, Robinson performed a victory dance. He would later tell the press that dance was called the Uncle Cliffy. And it became a cult phenomenon in Portland. So at first he didn't really like it. He didn't really want it. He kind of said it was, leave that Uncle Cliffy alone, please. This is an article from the Washington Post. He says, I shouldn't have even started. Everybody's trying to take the fact that I've been doing the Uncle Cliffy out of context. I'm here to play basketball because it was seen as showy. And, this isn't the NFL. There's no victory dances, all that sort of stuff. But, whatever the hell. The old people got all upset about it that time, but anyway, he would go on to embrace it. He'd own it. He'd decide to take ownership of it. It was like, hey, if you guys are going to call me it and it's going to become a negative connotation, screw that. I'm going to make it a positive connotation. And he did. I think Uncle Cliffy became kind of like a nice. I don't think it ever represented like showiness or showboating or anything like that. It just became like his name. Like that just was what he was. He owned it, which is pretty cool. So. He'd go on to fully embrace it. His Twitter handle was Uncle Cliffy 30. The basis for his marijuana dispensary is the perfectly named Uncle Spliffy. So, he just absolutely nailed it, which is perfect. Anytime anybody, takes something negative, if you can turn it into a positive, you are doing something right in your life. So, yeah, good on Cliff Robinson to do that.
Yeah. So the next key moment is winning the 1993 Sixth Man of the Year. Completely blew away all the competition that year, and most importantly, beat Danny Ainge, which is definitely
destroyed Danny Ainge, which is just just chef's kiss on that one. So maybe that's why he did the no headband thing. Now it's all coming together. He's like, you know what, screw that guy, no headband for him.
Oh, there you go. That'd be perfect. Yeah. Former teammate and future coach Danny Ainge he beat, but yes, he scored in double figures 76 times out of 82 games that he played, including a 40-point game in April against Utah. Had 5 30-point games that year. That 40-point game, he also had 5 blocks as well in that game. So one of the standout games of his career. And then, this would be kind of like the last year where he'd, be primarily a bench role player that you kind of move into the starting lineup the next year, kind of get full starters minutes. And for the next, 6-7 years or so, kind of, be, kind of be a starter and kind of be a prime player on his team. And this was only one of 9 seasons in NBA history that saw a player score more than 19 points a game, but start in fewer than 20 games. So that's pretty. He joined the other players who are on that list are Lou Williams, who did it twice, Jason Terry, Ricky Pierce, Thurl Bailey, Eddie Johnson, Xavier McDaniel, and also Thurl Bailey a second time. So that's a small and interesting list there. However, the team success there wasn't really as good as they were hoping for. This is after, of course, they made the 92 finals in 93. They lost to San Antonio in the first round. They kind of had the first of 6 straight losing in the first round for the Trailblazers, which, that definitely, isn't ideal, but, we've talked about before, the West was so incredibly stacked in the 90s, and, Blazers are generally making, 5th or 6th seed, most of those years, a few of them, they were the 8th seed, but, it was tough out there. I mean, I don't think losing in the first round all those times is as bad as it sounds.
No, absolutely not. And there's this like perception that like the West just got good, like, in the last, 2 decades or whatever. And, because the finals were coming out of, or the championship was coming out of Chicago all the time, it was the idea that, the West is, weak and the East is a powerhouse or whatever. No, the West was, it was 50 wins. It was like, always seemingly for the last 2-3 decades has been kind of the baseline to making it in the West and making the playoffs. So just making the playoffs that many years in a row, I think is a tremendous accomplishment. It's probably, it's tough if you're a fan of that team, knowing what's going on and trying like hell to try to win, and make it farther. But I think just honestly making the playoffs that many years in a row is pretty cool. So I will never be somebody that like, poo-poos that or says it's like, it's not worth anything. Yeah. Making it to the first round, making it to the playoffs every single year in a stacked West is perfectly fine with me. So.
Mm-hmm. So the next season, 1994, he plays in his only All-Star game. He had 10 points and 5 assists on 5 of 8 shooting, so acquitted himself well. His team, the West, fell to the East, 127-118 on Scottie Pippen's MVP performance that year. This was the first season in which he started the majority of his team's games for the first time. Led the team in scoring with 20.1 points per game. And on the team at that point as well. Drexler wouldn't be traded until the next season. Also had 6.7 assists, 6.7 rebounds per game, 1.9 assists, 1.4 steals, and 1.4 blocks. So, just definitely contributing in all areas on the box score. As we talked about, he had up to 2 blocks per game during that time. So shot blocking was always a strong skill. He always was around 1.1 to 1.5 steals per game as well. So definitely showed his versatility. The assists were not strong that year, but he'd be up to 3 assists per game, around his peak or so. So he definitely, would go up in that category as well. So he definitely was contributing pretty much in all areas of the box score.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, some of those numbers are kind of shockingly good, especially with that era as well. When you see the versatility, the numbers across the board, the scoring totals as well. we're talking about not today where like, it's pretty easy to routinely, or teams are routinely, throwing up 120, 130 or whatever. Like Robinson averaging the amount of points that he did on that team with a lot of depth and a lot of really good players, and in a league that was a lot slower and a lot, more methodical about, offense. Those numbers they're good numbers. They're really, really, really good numbers. And I think that, doing, some research for this, like, caught me by surprise, because I was just like, yeah, no, like, I thought he would be like in the 10 to 15 range. And I'm like, no, dude, this guy's like, he's putting up 19, 20, 21 points a game in an era where that was unique and that was special. So yeah, that's a huge credit to him in this era. And it speaks to his tremendous skills as well, that he was able to, achieve that.
Yeah. And there was that Oregon Live piece that we talked about on the Top 40 Blazers. It talks about, how this really was kind of a breakthrough for him. He really early in his career fought for respect among, the older guys on the team. He really wanted to be a starter. And definitely there were a lot of heated practices where, there were, especially with him and Jerome Kersey, where, they fought, and it was all about, competitive in terms of just, obviously Cliff wanted to be a starter, wanted to prove himself, and, and Kersey, wanted to keep his spot. It was all, for the most part, just professional competitiveness. And it, got heated sometimes. They got into fights. And Drexler talked about how, this was absolutely something that we needed to make this team better. And this was really kinds of things. And, Robinson admitted, like, he came to blows with, Kersey and Mark Bryant and Buck Williams in practices, but says that all of them also were his friends. And he says, I don't think I would have had an 18-year career without somebody like Jerome Kersey to go against. He played so hard every day that if you didn't, it would show up real quick. So I wasn't going to back down. And I think that earned their respect.
Yeah, and that's, sometimes, especially in those days, you had to do that. The vets didn't want to give their spots up, and you're a youngster. Yeah. Sometimes you gotta prove it on the court, and sometimes you gotta prove it off the court too. So it's definitely a different world. But it seems in all the stuff that it was like fights, but they were like the kind of fights that the classic, like, you're punching each other, then you're hugging each other like a minute later, type thing is what it sounds like for most of these. Those are spec fights where it's like, well, prove to me that you're tough, and then you prove you're tough. It's like, okay, you're tough. All right, cool. Yeah. Like, I've never been in those because I'm not tough, but I'm a lover, not a fighter, Jason. So that's
we're not high level athletes, so
well, speak for yourself.
Obviously, I know that you're quite an elite athlete in the podcasting world. I'm sorry, Rich, I didn't mean to make any assumption.
Jeez. Yeah. Jeez. Yeah, that's awesome. So, all right, next moment here. January 7th, 1996, Clifford Robinson is named the Player of the Week, and that's a tremendous honor for him. And man, this guy was excited about Christmas or New Year or what. I don't know what it was. He was really excited about the upcoming 1996 year, because he puts up 30 points on December 27th, 26 points on December 29th, another 20 points on the 30th. Then the year starts, and he is ready to go. He has 22 on the 2nd, 23 on the 3rd, 29 on the 5th, and then seals the deal with 41 points on the 7th of January. It's the third highest scoring game of his entire career. We'll talk about this here in a bit. The 50-point game against Denver on January 16, 2020. Or not 2020. That'd be very, very interesting if he did that. 2000. So that would be quite the year for Cliff Robinson to have 50 points and pass away in the same year. That'd be a tremendous accomplishment. But 42 points versus Portland. Revenge game on February 1st, 2001 are the other two highs. But yeah, this is the other one. He gets named the Player of the Week, and it's hard to argue with it. It's pretty good. Blazers aren't like, they go 3-3 during those games. It's not like they're, a really great team at this time, but no, I mean, great numbers. And yeah, for a guy, that's maybe not known for having huge explosions of scoring, just a few times here and there. Like these are pretty damn good numbers all in a week. So good for him.
Yeah. Pretty impressive. We went a little bit out of chronological order, but going back to February 1995, he played his last of 461 games in a row. He actually had 13 points in 11 minutes during that game. It was against the Golden State Warriors. I'm assuming he perhaps got hurt in that game, which is why he only played 11 minutes. And then missed a few games that year. But yeah, for the first 5 seasons of his career, he played all 82 games. Season number 6, he played 75. And then, yeah, pretty much for the next for the next 8-9 seasons, he played every game that he possibly could. really he played at least 71 games in every full season until the last season of his career, which he only played 50 games. So definitely had a lot of durability, to do so. And it's actually harder than you might think to find a list of Ironman streaks in NBA and ABA history. It isn't compiled in any source that I could find, but it is. It could be the 13th all-time on the list. I found definitely there are 12 streaks that are longer. It's possible there are a few others in there, but it's definitely, again, I'm guessing it's, top 15, top 20 in pro basketball history for sure. So definitely a impressive longevity record for him, and speaks to him that he was able to, play so many games in a row and played and missed very little time in his career, because of injury up until, his final season.
Yeah. And as we mentioned as well, it's, these aren't little, I come in for 2 minutes a game and then I go sit down or whatever. These are like heavy minute games. He's playing a lot of stuff. These are impressive games that he's playing in as well. So yeah, really, really cool list there. And some great names that he's involved with. So, all right, let's jump all the way now to January 16, 2000, we talked about this a little bit earlier. This is his 50-point game. He does it against the Denver Nuggets, January 16th, 2000. Sets the record for oldest ever player to score 50-plus points for the first time at 33 years and 2 months. And that lasts all the way until 2010, Andre Miller, which is one we talked about in our 50-point game series about Andre Miller, now the official old dude in the the group there for 50 for the first time to score 50. And this was the first 50-point game since, this is interesting too, April 7th, 1998, 21 months, 9 days between 50-plus games, as longest gap since a 3-season drought back in the mid-50s. So yeah, not many 50-point games going up between 1998 and 2000, but Clifford Robinson breaks that streak, and now during these playoffs, it's hard to go like 2 days without it. So it's pretty impressive how that's going. Yeah. But yeah, from fucking 1999 basketball, man. From 1998 to 2000, no 50-point games. Got to go all the way back to the mid 50s to find that. It's that's not good basketball. I don't like that basketball. I kind of like, I don't know. I kind of like somewhere in between for sure. So
yeah, I like. I tend to enjoy the more fast-paced, more scoring type basketball. When they don't play defense, that's what I like.
Yeah. When all these lazy players don't play defense, yeah, that's always
exactly that's the kind of basketball I enjoy. No, he had 50 points, 8 rebounds, 4 assists, 2 blocks. 17 to 26 from the field, 3 of 5 from 3, 13 and 15 from the line. So all around stout game, obviously. And probably almost certainly the best game of his career. He had some standout ones, but this was definitely it's really obviously career high in points, and probably his best all around game. But another great game that he had, not too far afterward in May of 2000, just a few months later, was his best player performance statistically. And he was against the Lakers in Game 4 of their this was a second round series. 32 points, 9 rebounds in a 117-98 Suns win against the Lakers. This is, of course, the 2000, the first Kobe, Shaq, and Phil Jackson is the coach year.
Yeah.
It prevented the Suns from being swept. It wasn't exactly, dramatic high stakes game outside of staving off a little bit of embarrassment. But yeah, he had, he had a strong game there. It was able to, help the Suns stave off. This was Jason Kidd, Penny Hardaway, Sean Marion as a rookie or maybe second year player, Rodney Rogers' sons, Kevin Johnson coming back for a cup of coffee type Suns. So they were definitely outmanned, but despite having some good players. But yeah, this was the standout playoff game of his career, his playoff career high.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, really, really good stuff there. This one is, as we mentioned, those damn Warriors. He misses the playoffs for the first time in his career, all the way into his 15th season. He reached the playoffs in each of his first 14 years. Obviously, tied him with Dolph Schayes, so the 5th longest streak in NBA history. Puts him 3rd behind Karl Malone, who that time was a Laker, 18 consecutive seasons, and the Bulls' Scottie Pippen at 16 consecutive players. That was active players at this time when he does miss this. And Robinson, there was a great quote here. He says, "I always thought I would just get there. You just get used to going every single year. You say, we're going, get ready, let's do this." That must be nice, Cliff. All right, like walking to training camp. Yeah, we're making the playoffs. Like, that must be nice, Cliff. Well, welcome to Golden State in the 2000s. So that's fine.
Right. Yeah,
you thought it was easy. Well, welcome to Golden State.
Exactly. Yeah. This is an article from sfgate.com, and Donald Foyle basically, he has a quote in there because Donald Foyle hasn't made the playoffs in his career, like 8 seasons at that point. He's like, he keeps annoying me with by saying that stuff. It just a funny quote about like how both of their experiences are just so completely different in the NBA. So I thought that was pretty funny.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, it is. I mean, he drops into a finals team, and then he's just always in the playoffs. That's awesome. But
right.
You can't stop the power of what the hell was the stupid Warriors Thunder guy logo? They had a mascot and he had a name, and I'm forgetting what it is. Which is
his name was Thunder. Yeah,
was it Thunder? Okay, we can't stop Thunder because that weirdo. Even though his name was okay, I guess he was Lightning, but I get the name Thunder. I don't know what that has to do with the Warriors, but thus is the 2000 Warriors. Who the hell knows? It's just a giant shrug. Yeah, who knows what any of this has to do with the Warriors? But thankfully they've righted the ship temporarily.
They have a bit, yeah. Well, I mean, they're a lottery team this year.
Yeah, we'll see. Maybe
really right of the ship. Yeah, maybe. Yeah, we'll see if the Steph Curry guy's still any good, next year. But, so you looking at his career in 2004. He definitely, probably one of the last great games of his career. Was January 15th, 2004 against a young LeBron James and the Cleveland Cavaliers. Scored 35 points, 8 rebounds on 7 of 8 3-point shooting, which was his career high for threes in a game. Was the second most threes by anyone in a game that season. There were 15 other players who had done so. The only guys who had more threes that year in a game were Gilbert Arenas, Tracy McGrady, Dirk Nowitzki, and Quentin Richardson. So I saw someone, and I don't remember exactly who it was offhand, but tweet that, LeBron played against Cliff Robinson. Cliff Robertson played against Robert Parrish. Robert Parrish played against John Havlicek, and John Havlicek played against Dolph Schayes, who goes back to the first year of the NBA and the last year of the NBL as well. I looked it up, and it's both in the new NBA and the old NBL. Schayes played against Charlie Shipp, who dates back to the first season of the NBL. So awesome. So back to 1937. So what's
it, 5? So what do you get? You get 5 players there to get there? Is it 5?
I think so. Yeah,
that's awesome.
Yeah, 6 players. Yeah, right. Exactly. Yeah. So that's a good 6 degrees of separation right there.
Yeah.
So
I love those. Yeah, those are fantastic. But yes, it's a great game. Like he was the hot hand, and they just said, "Screw it, play." And he played 42 minutes. 11 of 19 from the floor, 7 of 8 from 3, 6 of 7 from free throw, as we said, 8 rebounds, 35 points. He's a plus 26 and dude, he's not young. And they're just like, dude, go out there. And he outplays LeBron James in this game. I mean, LeBron has a pretty nice game himself, 8 of 21 from the field, 29 points, but he's no Cliff Robinson, man. He's no Clifford Robinson. They're putting up 35 points. For a pretty interesting Golden State Warriors team. As we said, not a putrid Golden State Warriors team. Like, they had talent, it just wasn't, it wasn't their year.
It was that same year where they missed the playoffs. Right. Right. Yeah. I mean, they had okay. Like I said, they were like a 35 ish win team. They had Jason Richardson. They had Speedy Claxton, who was still all right. Mike Dunleavy, who was fairly solid. Michael Petrus, I think, as a rookie. So even if a few of the guys who were part of that We Believe team later on, once Baron Davis came along and Steven Jackson and all those guys, but yeah, and this is of course LeBron's rookie season. But yeah, that's kind of a neat, just kind of random, fun game that he had. But yeah, then Cliff Robinson, 37, 38 years old, still capable of a big scoring binge and a great game.
Yeah, and that's the year we were talking about where it's like he's a very big part of that team, like, and they're not a terrible team, and he's like a big role in it. Yeah, 30. Not very often a 37-year-old comes in, starts for your team, and your team's not just absolutely putrid or like or he's not like one of the greatest players of all time. It's like very rarely does like a solid role player guy just stay solid and continue to be contributing piece to a team into his late 30s, and that's absolutely what Cliff Robinson was. So
yeah, absolutely. And yes, the final noteworthy moment is of course Clifford Robinson owning us on Twitter.
Yeah, so we had replied to this was when Tony Parker, I think it was one of his final seasons or his second or last season or whatever. So the San Antonio Spurs say, last night Tony Parker passed Kobe Bryant to move into 8th place on the NBA all-time wins list. And we had noted that list before, which again, I'll just reiterate who was on this list before. So there's Kobe Bryant, Tony Parker, Derek Fisher, Dirk Nowitzki, Karl Malone, John Stockton, Tim Duncan, Robert Parrish, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, and then Cliff Robinson is last on the list. And we tweeted, I forget who did this. I think maybe me or maybe I forget who it was.
It was me.
Okay, then it's your fault. So good for you.
It's my fault. Yes.
See, I knew Cliff Robinson's contributions to NBA history. You, on the other hand, did not. But so you wrote here, Jason Mann, wrote, I love that Cliff Robinson is in the top 10. How random. And then we got a reply from Uncle Cliffy 30, who was obviously throwing up doing some vanity searching. Maybe he's got TweetDeck set up for any mention of Clifford Robinson to pop up onto his feed or whatever. So, because this thing didn't get retweeted by 6,000 people, so that it would have showed up. I think old Uncle Cliffy there's got a little vanity search going on. And he goes, he replies, "Not random at all. You must not know your NBA history that well." Owned.
Yes, there we go. We were owned. Yeah. No, I mean, yeah. I obviously, we take it as a kind of a mix of bemusement and as an honor to for that to happen. And yeah, I can. It was of course not meant as an insult to him. I can see how he maybe took it that way, but it was, the guys on that list, with the exception of him and Derek Fisher, are like all-time
best players in NBA history. Yeah,
right? Who played. Most of them played, with one franchise most of their entire career and are like icons of that franchise. And Clifford and even Fisher, had most of his career with the Lakers and was part of some, of great 5 championship teams. So, and Clifford Robinson, again, more of a journeyman, known for some really good years with Portland, but, bounced around the league, had a lot of teams. It was just like, oh yeah, definitely not a name that I would have expected to be on there. But yeah, as we've shown here, I think, a lot of respect for him, his play, his career, all that good stuff. And, we had a good chuckle about the fact that he took a little umbrage from what we did. And, maybe he's right. Maybe we don't know as much about NBA history as we think we do.
Educate ourselves a little bit. No, but that's, I definitely think, and I always took it as being a little bit more of a kind of like a joke. Like, I cannot imagine that, like, Clifford Robinson at 48 years old is like upset that we or whatever, you know what I mean? Like, there's no way that he's like, these assholes. Like, if it was like Kevin Durant, I'd be like, oh yeah, this dude is like really upset that we're doing this. But I can't imagine Clifford Robinson is like actually upset about it. He's probably just laughing, as he's taking a smoke off of a gigantic blunt or something. You know what I mean? Like I doubt Clifford Robinson's like really upset about it. So we always took it as kind of a joke too. It wasn't like I felt like, oh man,
Yeah, we should have taken the opportunity to ask for a sponsorship, I guess.
Absolutely, we should have. Yeah, we missed that.
Yeah,
Uncle Spliffy.
I really missed that opportunity.
I would absolutely talk about Uncle Spliffy every single time on this show, so if we had the chance. But
exactly, yeah.
Probably too late for that, unfortunately, now. So rest in peace, Clifford Robinson. Mm-hmm.
Really, like I said, really good NBA player for some really interesting teams. Hopefully we did some justice to some of the top moments of his career. Lots of other stuff we could have gotten into too. And he was, he's again part of some really fascinating teams. Those early 2000s Pistons, those late 90s Suns. Lots of good stuff there. But
early barbed wire tattoo guy as well. He had the barbed wire tattoo around the bicep. I don't know who was like the the trendsetter in that. He may have been the trendsetter in that too. I don't know, but I remember he had it pretty early on in his career, and like, the old Bill Goldberg probably stole it from Clifford Robinson. I'm guessing. So.
There you go. Yeah, we'll see if
prove that it's not the case. I don't know. Prove that it's not true. So.
Prove it's we'll see. Maybe we'll do a sequel if we have to.
About the barbed wire tattoo.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. So deep investigation on the barbed wire tattoo in NBA history. Yeah. So, all right. Well, thanks, Rich, for doing this. This was it's obviously a sad moment, but it's also fun to dig into this stuff, and we always enjoy the opportunity, even when it's for a sad reason. But thanks everyone for listening. You can find us at the Step Back at fansided.com. You can also find us on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, wherever you listen to your podcast. Just search for Over and Back. We are also on Twitter and Facebook at Over and Back NBA. If you want to, give us some feedback and let us know any corrections or any ideas or any good stuff, compliments, criticism, you can throw someplace else. We don't want to hear that. No, I'm just kidding. Constructive criticism.
Constructive, damn it! Yeah, don't just be an asshole.
Yeah, so. yeah, right. We're not really big fans of that, but So thanks again for listening, and we'll be back again soon.